Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Business of Learning podcast. My guest here today is Chris Vance, who is the founder and CEO of Playground Sessions. Chris, I'm excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
Well, tell everyone a little bit more about what you guys are all about and what you have going on, who you help.
Yeah, so Playground Sessions is it's a music learning app. So we used to consider ourselves kind of the Rosetta Stone for music. Duolingo's done a heck of a job over the last 5 years, 7 years, building up their app in terms of language. So
Mm-hmm.
you could think of Playground Session as the Duolingo for music.
Mm-hmm. And how do you guys differentiate yourself from maybe other music apps that are out there in terms of being able to really provide that result for people, which is to learn how to play music?
Yeah, it's changed over time. When we first released. So let me back up. Like, what are we even?
Sure.
Why do we exist? Right? And I would say that there's just a big problem in the world. You get 90% of people raise their hands. This is all over any country. 9 out of 10 people will raise their hand when you ask the question, "Do you wish you played an instrument?" Okay. If you ask those same people if they tried, 9 out of 10 will say, "I tried, but I failed." And these instruments end up in the closet or under the bed. So it's a big issue, and you
Mm-hmm.
have all of these keyboard manufacturers, guitar manufacturers that are well aware of it. And in
Mm-hmm.
many ways, you're kind of stigmatizing people because they're not having success. And then they're thinking to themselves, "Hey, I'm not talented," or "I wasn't meant to be a musician," which is just not true. The
Mm-hmm.
traditional ways of reaching people in music has fallen short, I would say, nicely. And Playground Sessions and our competition is using, new ways of learning,
Mm-hmm.
technology, video lessons, gamification's been a big one now over the last
Mm-hmm.
handful of years, to just provide a better experience. When we first started, a lot of people was going to YouTube. So when YouTube, I don't know, maybe launched 15 years ago ish,
Mm-hmm.
I remember kind of studying that platform, and the top 10 search results on YouTube were all dominated by like music learning stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it
Interesting.
was obvious that you had so many people that was like, okay, I can't afford private lessons. I'm kind of over the books, kind of going to YouTube. But YouTube had lots of different problems. So
Mm-hmm.
when we first started, it was really us against YouTube from a tech front.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then the piano books, printed sheet music, things like that, private lessons. And then we
Yeah.
tried to solve for convenience, affordability.
Mm-hmm.
And then over time, the space is really, really big. And some of the good, some of the bad with technology. It's easier to do things today. So we have seen a rise in competition, but that's a good thing. It just continues to say that there's millions of people around the world that
Mm-hmm.
want to have success,
Yeah.
right? So we really differentiate ourselves in a few ways. I do believe that we have the best retention. So if you
Mm.
look at all of the apps out there and you kind of compare how long people use the app, I think Playground Session stands out
Mm.
as number one, at least my understanding from speaking to different founders and CEOs. They're always quite impressed by our retention. So why
Mhm.
is that? We have amazing teachers that are always available 24/7. Our technology is awesome, real-time feedback, so you know
Mm.
exactly what you're doing right or wrong. You get accuracy scores, gamification, dashboards. But probably the most important is we've partnered with all the music publishers.
Mm.
So when you're learning whether or not you're playing your first note, let's say what's the first note you learn to play? Pretty often people talk about middle C on the piano. Well, we'll teach you middle C is the first note you play, but we'll put it in the context of the Star Wars soundtrack.
Mm.
So now when you play middle C, right, it's like, wow, that felt amazing, that felt cool. So our curriculum, and it's kind of a learning path that is just constantly new
Mm.
music, cool music you know and love, makes it more fun and engaging.
Mhm. That's so interesting. And have you found that you are creating a larger impact in a certain type of demographic, maybe a certain age range?
It's
Maybe.
kind of a marketer's nightmare, quite frankly,
Mm.
because it's kind of everyone. So if you take the traditional demographic approach, 18 to 24,
Mhm.
25 to 35, 35 to 45, blah blah blah,
Sure.
it's almost evenly split.
Mm.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Interesting.
Excuse me.
You're all good.
Um, it's about evenly split. I would say,
Mhm.
if anything, we slant a little bit more kind of young professional into the baby boomers
Mm.
versus, call it maybe the college kid because they got other things going on. Um, But yeah, I mean, I call it a marketer's nightmare. I don't truly mean that. It's great to be able to serve so many
Of
people.
course.
Everyone has the same desire to play music, to express themselves through music,
Hmm.
to learn things, to build skills, hobbies. So it's certainly a great place to be.
Yeah, and I completely relate to the marketer's nightmare because oftentimes it's so great to be able to help everyone, but it's also okay. How do I tell everyone that
How
I
do
can help them? So it's like it's
Yeah, and how do especially when when you're building businesses and growing businesses, the importance of like
mhm,
focus in your marketing efforts. Everyone talks about A/B testing, and that's great, but you don't want everything to be about A/B testing.
sure.
So we have a big audience,
Hmm.
right? So we're always looking at different ways to reach them as productively as we can.
For sure. And talking about challenges, what were some of those challenges? Obviously, growing the company that I'm not sure if they are the same challenges as you have right now, but what were some of those as you were creating the company, growing it, and building it to what it is today?
Yeah,
That you,
I'd say so. I recently have been thinking about um, something that's very related to your question.
mm,
I guess I always assumed falsely that whatever kind of like you build your company and let's say you get to your first million of revenue
sure.
and there's a lot that needs to happen there and it's very,
Hmm.
very difficult. And then you go from your first million to maybe your first five or your first 10.
Mm,
And actually that process, what works there, what's needed is quite different than the first million. You
yeah.
know what I mean? So we're now more at that kind of scaling phase.
Hmm.
And that scaling phase from managing resources to your marketing efforts to brand building
Hmm.
is actually quite different. They're both incredibly challenging.
Hmm.
I'm not sure one's necessarily easier or harder or more enjoyable than the other. They
Sure.
they pose their own challenges.
Hmm.
Um, when you're first starting, it's I would say getting the product market fit is
Hmm.
so difficult. If you rush that process, then you
Yeah.
probably maybe never get the chance to try to scale.
Hmm.
You're building partnerships. Just the foundation of the brand are so important.
Hmm.
If you've done a good job there, you'll be able to kind of leverage that hard work over time. You get
Yeah.
into scaling now. Now you're talking about okay, who is our audience and how do I
Hmm.
reach them, right?
Hmm.
And maybe I'm gonna speak to this audience for a period of time, and then when's the right time to move to a new audience without alienating the other
Hmm.
audience from a
Yeah.
product or from a marketing perspective. So
For sure.
I
Yeah.
always, I always say it's all a challenge.
And when it comes to like you guys have already found that product market fit, you have a product that's really desirable. People want it, people enjoy it, people tell other people about it. And so now, what are some of those things that are like always knocking on the door? Is like, hey, do you remember me? I'm the challenge that you have going on. Are there certain things that stand out in the process that you are in at the moment?
Gosh, I think there's a few. I always kind of talk about technology from like a good but also a challenging perspective. So
Mm,
most businesses now have found their way into more of a subscription model.
sure.
Okay. So in the old days, you built a product, you put it out on shelf, right? Or even in the digital world, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. And hopefully you've done a great job. You've solved the problem, filled the need, and great.
Hmm.
Not like that anymore. So now people are in these subscription businesses, and you're constantly working on the product side because that's their expectation,
Mm,
because there's constant innovation in the category, yada, yada, yada. So I would say, regardless if you're early on
mm,
or even if you're at the scaling phase, the fact that we live in a world of SaaS
mm,
um, means you have to continue to innovate, which is a good thing. I mean,
hmm.
everybody wants to innovate,
For sure.
but there's so many devices. There's so many, iOS now is making more updates than they used to. Android, yeah. So there's a lot, probably more than you like to admit,
Mm,
on just keeping the product where it kind of needs to be,
hmm.
right? Given the high expectations and the
Hmm.
new operating systems
Yeah.
and browsers constantly coming out, but you still carve out enough time to do the real innovation,
Yeah.
right? That kind of moves the needle. So I would say the the product is still super central.
Hmm.
Also, certainly ever since it was April 2021 when all the ATT new laws came out around privacy,
Mm,
has just really changed the landscape in terms of digital marketing.
mm,
So, if you're building a digital, whether or not it's e-learning or ed tech, you're certainly trying to figure out your marketing funnel. And it used to be you brought somebody to your app, brought somebody to your website, and you could continue to speak to them,
mm-hmm,
right? They just continue to see your ads or new messaging. But I don't know what the stat is now. I remember when kind of the privacy laws came out in terms of retargeting, it was somewhere in like the mid 90% of people were opting
mm,
out of that. So I
mm,
think the last few years, as we've kind of been working through new ways to
mm-hmm,
reach customers that still has a positive return on investment. And
mm-hmm.
you have TikTok, and just the world
Yeah.
continues to change. And what we now your younger audience doesn't want to be on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
but again, you have an older audience that does. So it's just
Yeah.
working through the different channels
Uh-huh.
as efficiently as you can becomes even more challenging as you
Mm-hmm.
scale, because you're putting more dollars to work. So
Yeah.
any miss there could hit your bottom line more profoundly.
Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting you mentioned the part where the updates and policies and the things that come on that come out that are out of our control.
Yeah.
And even so, the Meta has now obviously other platforms too. They have adapted to try to get around that and make sure that everything is optimized with algorithms and all these things. But I find it interesting how you said innovation, and out of hundreds of conversations that I've had, that word came up a lot.
Yeah.
And what I've found that is a lot of founders, CEOs, leaders, they want to innovate. They don't really understand how to innovate. How do you approach looking for innovation? Is it just keeping up with trends, looking at what's going on in the marketplace, listening to your customers? How do you approach that to make sure that at least you're going in the right direction?
So it's a bit of all of it.
Mm,
But if I was to define it best, I think it's a culture that starts with risk taking.
mm,
You have to have a culture that is comfortable with risk, right, and feels safe, right? I need everybody on the team to realize if we're not taking risk, we won't be rewarded in the future,
mm,
because some other company will be, whether or not it's a bigger company or it's a new startup,
mm-hmm,
especially startups, right? That you're not in the startup business if you're not in the business of risk. So I think innovation is about having a culture of risk, done in a safe environment, so people are willing to put themselves out there, not
mm,
being afraid to fail, understanding that failing is certainly part of that process.
interesting. And for a culture, how have you managed to, or if maybe you haven't, I don't know, I'll
Yeah.
find out, but how have you worked around being able to systematize hiring for the right culture? So making sure that everybody that comes in is going to be more of that red lens at the side, and they want to seek for growth. They want to push. They always want to keep on the upside of things as opposed to just settling for what they already have.
Yeah, so I think for that specifically, it's a couple things come to mind. One is I like to lead by example in this situation,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'll put big ideas out there, sometimes crazy ideas, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll ask you, give me the detail behind it. Okay, I know it's crazy, but what would it take? How long would it take? Could we actually do it? So I think even though, and I'm never intentionally doing that just from a culture perspective,
Yeah.
but I think that is what I think is necessary from innovation. So I will definitely lead by example there. Um, in the hiring process, I mean, there are certain things you can ask. Like for example, um, I remember hearing or reading somewhere, and it made a lot of sense to me. If you're trying to hire a creative person, and I'm not talking about like an ad person or somebody
Sure.
who's in the creative field, but let's say you're even hiring an accountant,
Mm.
right? Or just a customer support person. I believe in the importance of creativity.
Yep.
So if you ask somebody, do you think you're creative? 8 out of 10 times, 9 out of 10 times, that question will give you the answer you're looking for. So you could do the same thing when it comes to risk taking,
Mm.
right? Do you
Mm.
consider yourself a risk taker? And you can see the body language. Okay, can you have some examples, some recent examples,
Mm.
right? And then if somebody's, especially recently, kind of rattling them off, that's going to kind of give you a sense. It's also important when you're interviewing to talk about what your expectations are, what you are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, not being afraid if you bring somebody in and it's just not working out one way or another,
Hmm.
um, that you're honest and transparent about it, and you try to move on and find a better cultural fit down the line.
Do you think that leaders often lack the, I don't know if the capacity would be the right word, but they often don't ask as many questions as they should to be, and not even specifically to hiring now, but I'm speaking on team management, but they don't ask enough questions to really understand where their team is at and to be able to lead them the right way, as opposed to just do this, do that.
Yeah, I think you're getting into there's a little bit of two things going on there: leadership and management, which
Hmm.
in many ways are can be a bit different. But what I would say is management is incredibly difficult. Um, Not everyone's meant to be a manager. You look
Mm.
in tech, you have so many people that try to get into management and then quickly want to get back into the code, right? So
Hmm.
I think bigger organizations. I used to work at Procter and Gamble, for example. They have great training. You kind of go through, spend time there. They're going to give you every opportunity to succeed at in management, but that is not every organization. That's certainly
Hmm.
not smaller startups. So
Yeah.
it just kind of depends on where you are. Management has it tough because often you're under resourced, so you have to kind of keep pushing the business forward, which means often
Mm.
you're in the detail, you're doing your own work, and you have to carve out enough time, to spend with your team to make sure that you're not doing the work for them. You're
Mm.
basically the good managers are just asking questions.
Mm.
You're trying to shape them in a way where eventually they can kind of ask their own questions and get to their own answers. But if you're
Hmm.
doing a good job, you're just there in a safe environment to be asking them questions, and hopefully they get to their own
Yeah.
answers. But it's a full-time job, and
Hmm.
unfortunately, I think most managers don't have the opportunities to just solely focus on it, and that's kind of the fault of the organizations.
Interesting. What were some of the lessons that stand out to you in these years of building playground sessions and things that I would say are ingrained in your mind of like, oh, I'll make sure to note that down for the future. So this is the thing that I'll always look towards.
I mean, some of them are just so obvious. I think I'm going to start with this one because it's tied. It's like,
Sure.
unfortunately, certain things you just have to go through yourself.
Yeah. Unteachable lessons.
It's kind of like when you're a kid and your parents are like, all they care so much about you. They really want the best for you, but you don't want to hear it.
Hmm.
And then you kind of grow up and you're like, gosh, yeah, I guess that does make a lot of sense. So
Yeah.
I think it's frustrating because you're like, this is obvious and I've been told this and I get this, but why don't you accept it until you go through it?
Hmm.
So I don't know the answer to that one. I would say that is a lesson. You have to live the experience. It's like a
Mm.
musician. Your music gets better over time as
Mm.
you've had more life experience.
Hmm.
So I think the tip there is to be forgiving, be patient with yourself, be patient with the organization,
Hmm.
accept failure as it comes. Just get the learnings from it and
Hmm.
kind of keep pressing forward. That's key. Here's another, again, obvious one.
Sure.
Um, you really want to spend the right time getting the right people around you.
Mm.
You just you know going it alone is insane. Um, it's I don't. The part of me thinks with AI and technology, maybe we'll see like a one person founder who built $1 billion business with just one employee. It's possible. I don't know,
I
but
think nowadays, yeah, maybe.
yeah, I think we could get there, but it's certainly less enjoyable.
Hmm.
But just surround yourself, especially early on, by the right people
Hmm.
that complement you. Be honest where you thrive. I mean, even as
Mm.
founder and CEO, you're supposed to thrive everywhere, but it's just not true. There's
Mm.
there's there's parts of the business where I have a harder time getting energy for, or I'll kind of take the lead and I kind of look back on my own personal execution. Wow, man, geez, so there's got to be so many people that can do that better than me. Why don't I even touch
Yeah.
that one, right?
Hmm.
So I just think getting the hiring people right is critical early on, and then probably the most fundamental of all. And again, for whatever reason, easier said than done.
Mm.
If you're doing anything that the customer's not asking for, it's just a waste of time.
Mm.
Stay really, really in touch. with the customers. They do know best. Now, people argue some innovations they have no idea. They can't even read. It's kind of the Steve Jobs thing, though.
Sure.
But most of the time, for most products, most innovations, um, they can get their heads around it really quick.
Hmm.
And the more in I think Amazon does a real good job at that. Procter and Gamble, Consumers Boss. It's so fundamental. I
Mm.
think if you're not laser focused on what the customer wants, then it's probably a wasted effort.
Yeah, that's so interesting you say that because I've had so many talks where there's a certain conceptualized vision for the company, and they're like, "This is what our customers want." And
Yeah.
then I'm asking these leaders. I've asked them before. I was like, "Okay, then when's the last time you talked to a customer?" They're like, I was like, "Oh, so is it what they actually want, or is it what you think they want?" So I think it's so important that you bring that up of being able to keep in touch and prioritize what they truly care about as opposed to what you think they care about. So,
Yeah, so for me, so I do that in a few different ways.
mm,
I definitely stay very, very close to our customer support team daily. Anything new? What are we hearing? Even though they're probably tired of telling me the same things.
yeah.
But then I also personally make it a point to get on phones with customers every week. I probably take ten phone
Mm,
calls a week. And, it's funny because I'm on these calls to, sure, hopefully reduce their frustration,
sure.
get them the answer or fix whatever it may be.
Hmm.
But anyone on our team is trained to do that. I'm there to kind of understand how their experience is.
Mm,
So you get on these calls, people are frustrated, technical support. So I got charged for something. I'm like, hey, I totally get it. Um, do you mind just stepping back for a second? I'm just curious, when things are working for you, how do you like Playground? And I'm very proud of this, and I know this from Procter and Gamble. But we get the word love
mm,
often cited to describe us, and you think about how few products there are in your house. Maybe for some people they got to go outside of their car or something like that. But to
sure.
use the word love,
Hmm.
it's pretty special for us. So I
Mm,
make it a point to get on the phone with the customers directly. I
hmm.
review customer support tickets. Sometimes I'll answer them myself. And then, the
Mm,
obvious ones when you're doing different surveys. Why? I think one of the watch outs is, you look at your app store ratings, things like that. Oh, I'm a 4.8 out of 5. That all
mm,
sounds great. You really want to be in the touch with the people that are canceling, right? Or got to your website
yeah.
and didn't purchase, or tried your free trial and
Didn't follow
didn't
through.
convert, and
Hmm.
understand what's kind of going on there, because there's just deep insights just blossoming and just waiting
Yeah.
to be mowed.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I really like the fact that you put yourself out there on the field to really understand that. I can't remember anyone that I've spoken with that is obviously has built something as great as you guys have and still takes the time to do that. So I really want to one commend you for that, but two, thanks for the note. And then
Yeah.
I have a couple more questions here for you,
Sure.
Chris. One of them is one that I like to ask because it often just gets people to think a little bit outside the box. So I'll start with that one, and then I'll finish off with another one. If you had a magic wand that you could just wave towards your business, and it could just solve one thing that would make hitting your goals or achieving the growth that you want, or getting more clients, or solving a specific problem that would that would lead you to achieve what you want to, what would that one thing be?
That's kind of impossible.
I know,
I,
yeah.
so I think the honest answer uh, everyone should be giving is, how do we how do we reach our core customer
Hmm.
uh, more cheaply,
Mm,
right? Because once you have a good product, once you have good retention, which we have, which a
hmm.
lot of companies have,
Sure.
right? You have a lot of product founders that do a good job building something that's pretty great. The
Hmm.
problem is often it just solves their own problem.
Yeah.
Like, built some, it's like, I selfishly built something for myself. Why don't people want it? So when you're in the scaling phase, it's all about reach. How do I reach people in an affordable way to get them onto the platform? So
Mm,
if I had a magic wand, I'd want to know, instead of, let's say, you're spending $50 to acquire a customer, how do I do it for $5?
hmm.
Whatever way that is. I would like to know that, and that's where That's where I'd be putting all my effort. Other than that, that's kind of an obvious one: how to
Hmm.
acquire customers more cheaply.
Yeah.
Um, I would say, especially tech companies, back to like the consumer side is high expectation, hardware's getting better, faster,
Mm.
but you need to keep up, right? So how do you just innovate,
Mm.
more quickly? So much you can do with technology,
Yeah.
right? But prioritizing the right things based on what
Mm.
customers want is challenge easier said than done. You can put a
For
lot
sure.
of time and effort on, okay, make sure we're prioritizing and being transparent and having a good process to follow and
Hmm.
things like that. But how do you do that in a world where you still want to be fast
Yeah.
and take risk? Is a challenge.
Yeah, I think as business owners, there's always going to be a million things that we can try to fix and obviously try to optimize. But I think it's as you said, it's the priority. Which one is more important than the others, and the other ones will get solved as a result of the first ones getting solved in the first place. So it's like,
Exactly.
how do we make sure that that's the sequence is correct? And final question here for you, Chris, which is actually not a question for me. It's a question from the last guest that we had, and they had no idea who you were. So you ready for it?
Yeah.
What is your greatest weakness, and what will you do tomorrow to improve it?
Um, Good question. I think probably my greatest weakness is I tend to get involved in too many things.
Mm,
I definitely don't believe in micromanagement. So I'm not doing that, but I'll take on more. As I said earlier, right? Like I'll do something, as founder, oh, I can handle that. And then I'll
hmm.
look at it. I'm like, yeah, geez, like that wasn't that great. And
Sure.
probably could assign that to somebody different.
Hmm.
Um, so I think, yeah, I just spread myself a bit too thin. And I think that just comes from I love all aspects of the business, whether or
For
not it's
sure.
accounting, financing, customer support, product innovation, whatever it is.
Hmm.
I kind of love it all, and the more I'm into things, I feel more connected to the team, whether or not it's
Mm,
in one-on-ones or town halls or whatever it is, because I'm kind of I got my hands on a lot of different things. But I
sure.
think that's probably inefficient.
Mm,
I don't think my team's going to say, "Oh, they're micromanagement," because I'll just take on a whole new project. Um, so how do I fix that starting tomorrow? I just think it's about looking at how I'm spending my own time. I'm good at the organizational level and make sure we're
mm,
working on the right priorities. I got my list. I'll start off my day making sure I'm doing the right priorities for my own time. Once
hmm.
we get into the back half of the afternoon, the last 3 hours of the day, oh, I'll work on that. I'll work on that. But I'm
Uh-huh.
probably better off not getting involved in
Mm.
so many things.
Hmm. That's so so interesting. Well, Chris, thank you
Good
so much for
question.
your time. I really
You're
really
welcome.
no props to me. Props to the past guest, which was actually oh my god, it was Jim from Camp Negotiations. So that was a great question there. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, Chris. I really appreciate it. Where
Thank you
can
so much.
people
Great
go?
questions. Appreciate
Yeah,
being here.
where can people go if they want to keep up with what you're doing? Obviously, learn a little bit more about
You
playground
go to
sessions.
Google Play or the App Store and just look up Playground Sessions. Our website is playgroundsessions.com. If you're looking to learn to play the piano or come back to it after a long time, it really is a great way to spend your time.
Awesome, Chris. Thank you so much.
Thank you.